So now, as I promised a few weeks ago, this video is going to be about the 2022 election results in Washington State. Now, if you care about freedom and liberty, these election results are certainly uglier than they needed to be. They shouldn't have been this bad, but that is how it worked out. So let's get into some of the specifics. Again, I'm kind of forced into my usual caveats about the egregiously regressive election system that we have here in Washington State, since it's still trying to sort out the election results weeks after Election Day. And this regression, not just in our state, but it's a few others like Arizona, California, and Colorado, continues to demonstrate how our nation once was able to resolve the election results in the middle of a civil war before electricity by candlelight and horseback, and then telegraph, and they did that far more quicker and more effectively back then than we do today. Sometimes I feel like we're living in a scene from the 2006 movie Idiocracy. When you observe government today, you realize that that movie was a more accurate predictor of the future than anyone ever realized at the time. But I digress. Overall, despite the fact that every single poll commissioned by Republicans or Democrats indicated that the Republicans would pick up some seats in the state legislature, that was not to be. At this point, it actually appears that Republicans will instead likely lose at least one seat each in both of those legislative bodies. Now, again, this isn't because I know this for a fact, but since random late batches of ballots are still being counted or cured, this is just our best guess at this point. Now, obviously, this was a poor and unanticipated worse result than anyone would have expected, including the Democrats, by the way. So there'll be some soul searching by insiders, but not too much. Mainly the consultants will blame Trump, the Dobbs decision, and the candidates for their failures and spend the next 6 months trying to kind of spin these failures until they convince the next batch of candidates to hire them once again to do more of the same. Now, I don't entirely buy those excuses yet. However, there's an obvious and growing movement inside the general Republican Party for the change of sorts. But this movement is both fractured and it's really not in charge of anything. There's actually different camps there. So recently, the Republican caucus in the state legislature voted for a leadership change in Spokane. That's what they do every couple of years. And they essentially decided to change nothing by a relatively narrower margin than I think they were expecting. This might be disappointing to activists around the state, but it does show that there's a plurality of elected Republican legislators who clearly recognize that maybe doing the same thing over and over again isn't the optimal path to success. However, a majority still seem to think that all is well. So I'll address what I believe needs to be done at the end of this video, but let's continue with the results as we know them now. Well, the Republicans failed miserably in Washington State at the federal level. They also lost a clear battleground seat in the 8th Congressional District, one that should have been very winnable, and a long-shot campaign to unseat the dumbest federal legislator, or federal senator, I should say, in Washington, D.C., Patty Murray. The worst tangible result is actually a very close loss in the 3rd Congressional District in Southwest Washington. It was a very narrow election result as far as the difference right now, with over 318,000 votes cast in the 3rd Congressional District so far. Less than 3,000 votes separate Republican Joe Kent from victory, and there's still thousands of outstanding ballots that need to be cured or rehabbed. Now, for those who don't understand the joys and wonder of an all-mail-in voting system, this doesn't refer to the ballots that the post office lost or the secret stash of ballots waiting to be discovered in the trunk of an election worker's car. Nor am I referring to a stash of ballots waiting to be completed and discovered as needed in a very close race. No, this actually refers to ballots that the machines rejected due to various reasons, usually a failure for the signature to match. Now, there were just under 9,000 ballots in this district which fell into this category right in the beginning, but there's still about 3,000 of these that need to be cured as best I can figure out. So remember that I'd mentioned in my post-election video on the subject that the Secretary of State's centralized database for signature verification had some major problems. Well, the way Clark County in particular was impacted by that technical fiasco was just to pile up a bunch of ballots rejected due to signatures not matching. Not because they actually didn't match, but because the system wouldn't respond in a timely manner. So the last few weeks, hundreds of volunteers have been running around the district trying to collect signatures from the voters who had their ballot originally rejected so that it could be accepted now. Now, this has been a slow and tedious process. The reason the media have called the election results of this particular election for the Democrat candidate is the general view by insiders that there's not enough ballots left to actually give Joe Kent the edge, even if they're all cured. So that's where we're at right now. Now, in King County, I'm going to point out that unfortunately the voters decided to make the public safety situation a lot worse moving forward now by voting for this Lisa Mannion over Jim Farrell. Anybody who knows, Jim Farrell and I have had our disagreements, but clearly in this position, he actually would have prosecuted criminals, and we've chosen to put somebody in there who probably won't. Now, this was a 57-41% split, so it appears that a lot more people in King County need to be harmed, apparently, by the growing crime wave in Mannion's proposed criminal catch and release and her wrist slap prosecution program. But as bad as the public safety issue in King County has become, it can actually get a lot worse, and this trajectory just appears to remain on track right now, just based on these election results. Now, on the good news side of the ledger, and there was some good news if you look around the state, Clark County appeared to solidly reject Proposition 10, which would have introduced ranked choice voting into local elections to make them worse and even more opaque and confusing than they are now. So this is actually good news for Clark County, and it's even better news for Washington State. In Mason County, the weird political hack auditor Patty McGuire was defeated by political newcomer Steve Dunkel. Now, that was despite King 5 News and all the other groupthink corporate media gang piling into Patty's corner, and 75% of his campaign cash flooding in from out of state or out of county, and a major D.C. PAC that decided to jump into Mason County to protect him. So while the newly elected auditor has his work cut out for him, because I'm sure the DC PACs, Facebook, Zuckerberg, and corporate media are going to be angry with this election result, at least this demonstrates that local people can indeed overcome the Borg when they focus and go out and do the right thing. Now, in Spokane County, the Republicans managed to hold on to a majority of their recently expanded county commission, which was expanded from 3 to 5. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but it's a fairly big deal, and it does change the makeup of the political structure in that county. But it was a close-run thing. Unfortunately, the auditor's race has actually only a narrow gap of 1,200 votes at this time. That's out of 218,000 or so cast. So a higher voter participation this cycle in Spokane would have impacted this race, I presume, positively. But when over a third of the voters don't believe their vote counts and they decide to stay home, they simply ensure that their vote absolutely won't count. So they're going to continue to get more of the same in Spokane County. Now, as I predicted in my last video on this subject, roughly 40%, which ended up being actually closer to 37%, decided to stay home and sit this election out. So spin it how you like, but those votes could have made a big difference, and I would argue that they probably would have made a better difference if there had been a higher participation with some of those people. So as I get a chance to dig deeper into the final numbers, I hope to give you more nuance in turn and to explain maybe the turnout details as they varied from precinct to precinct. There might be some interesting things there, but we essentially have changed very little politically in our state over the past few years, and this November election week or month, depending on how you look at it, really didn't change too much. Now, from a freedom and liberty perspective, this isn't good, but it also means that we have work to do. We have to continue to expose the truth about the clowns running government today. They can't help themselves but continue down the arrogant path that they're on, and they're going to hurt us more and more. They just are addicted to that. I don't think they can change. So this behavior eventually is going to result in a political change of some kind at some point in time in the future. Now, saying that they cheated isn't enough, and frankly, this encourages lazy and simple responses. Some of what people call cheating is just legal. Maybe it's unethical, but it's legal behavior, and it's legal regardless, and this would include ballot harvesting en masse, and election education programs, and other activities that conservatives need to master, regardless of how much we don't like it. We have no real choice. These legal activities will only be changed when the ruling establishment starts to lose by those same tactics. Suddenly, then, and only then, they'll discover voting integrity for the first time since maybe Trump 2016 or Florida in 2000. So we have more to discuss on this topic, much more, and I think it's worth going into a lot more details about it. But I just wanted to give this brief update for now. It's been a little while since we talked about this. And I want to remind you, if you can, to share this video with others if you think they might be interested. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to learn more, please go down below. I've linked to some good reference websites that'll help you if you want to learn more about this. Don't forget, the future belongs to those who show up.